don't have time to go through all 7 types of strategies that you lay out. But if there was one where you go, okay, in this year where I know leaders to be, their mindset, what they've experienced, what is the one you would say, hey, focus on this thing this week, this month with you and your team?
Totally. The fundamental or foundational one is the paradox principle of sacrifice. And this matters for leaders and their team because never more in the last couple of years have people pointed to circumstance and blamed their results on circumstances. But like our results, circumstances cannot dictate whether or not we are successful. Our choices dictate whether we are successful. And our character is what determines our choices. And so championship character, right, comes from like cultivating these disciplined choices. And so the way the paradox principle of sacrifice works, and here's the story that people love. So I grew up in Colorado. We've been in Nashville since 2010, so we've been here a while. But in Colorado, we are world famous for the Rocky Mountains. And so what happens is to the western part of the state, we have the Great Rocky Mountains. But what a lot of people don't realize is that Colorado as a state is divided almost exactly in half. And so to the eastern part of the state are the Great Kansas Plains. So it's really flat. Because of that sort of unique topographical landscape, Colorado is one of the only places in the world that has both buffalo and cows. And there is a great lesson, George, for leaders to learn from studying the way that these two creatures respond to storms. So when a storm comes, storms almost always brew from the west, and what happens is they roll out towards the east. And what cows do is very natural. So a cow can sense that a storm is coming from this direction, and so a cow will run east to try to run away from the storm. Now, the only problem with that is that if you know anything about cows, you know that they're not real fast. And so the storm catches up with them rather quickly. Well, without knowing any better, the cows continue to try to outrun the storm. Instead of outrunning the storm, though, they actually run with the storm, which maximizes the amount of pain and time and frustration they experience from that storm. Isn't that stupid? But humans do the same thing all the time. We are constantly trying to avoid the inevitable challenges that come from these sort of difficult circumstances that our very own choices have led us to be in. People who are in debt, I can speak from personal experience, are constantly trying to find ways around paying their bills and controlling their spending. People who are overweight, I was also 45 pounds heavier than I am right now. I can speak from personal experience, are often making rationalizations for why it won't work, why it won't change. I've already tried, or it doesn't matter. It's not going to affect me. People who are struggling in their marriage and they're having difficulty with their communication, they're often avoiding the difficult but meaningful conversations that need to be had to reconcile that relationship. And the same with leaders. There are difficult decisions you need to make. There is a person that is on your team that you knew 6 weeks after they started, they weren't going to make it. And you've allowed them to hang out for 9 months to pollute your culture, right? There is someone on your team who had a bad attitude last week, and rather than addressing it, you've let it sweep under the rug, and now it's becoming an acceptable, tolerated part of the culture. And the key insight that the ultra performers have made that most of us have not yet is ultra performers know problems that are procrastinated on are only amplified. Problems procrastinated on are only amplified. So waiting always makes it worse. What buffalo do is very unique for the animal kingdom. And so what buffalo do is they wait for the storm to cross right over the crest of the peak of this mountaintop. And as the storm rolls over the ridge, buffalo turn and they charge directly into the storm. So they run at the storm, and by running at the storm, they run straight through it, which minimizes the amount of pain and time and frustration that they experience from that storm. So notice how it's the exact same storm, which is such a great metaphor for every leader listening, right? Even though we're in different industries and in different parts of the world and with different size companies, we're all dealing with the same types of storms, right? We all have too much to do. We all are trying to find good people. We're all trying to develop better processes. Like we all have the same struggles. even in our personal life, financially, physically, spiritually, maritally. Like we don't get to choose whether or not we have storms. Our only choice is how we respond to those storms.